like to start with a quote from Henry Ford, the founder of Ford Motor Company. Anyone who stops learning is old at 20 or 80. Anyone who keeps learning stays young. Hello, curious minds. Welcome to ProjexCellence ProDigy, my YouTube channel, where we aim to break down the complex project management topics into simpler terms by relating them with real-world examples. In our last episode, we took a deep dive into development of project management plan. Today, we are focusing on one of its essential components, project scope management. Let's explore this crucial subsidiary plan in detail. Project scope management. It is a critical aspect of project management that involves defining and controlling what is and is not included in the project. The main goal of scope management is to ensure that the project includes all the work required to complete the project successfully and nothing more. This helps in preventing scope creep, ensuring clear requirements, and managing stakeholders' expectations. In project management, it is often said in case of project scope, no gold plating, which means sticking to the agreed upon requirements and not going beyond them, even if we believe the additional work would add value. So if you recall this chart from our previous episode, we discussed it in detail. So this is the project management process group. Here we can see under project scope management knowledge area, there are total 6 processes. 4 processes fall under planning process group and remaining 2 processes fall under monitoring and controlling process group. So the very first one is plan scope management, means developing a scope management plan that documents how the project scope will be defined, validated, and controlled. The second process is collect requirements. So in this, we will determine, document, and manage stakeholder needs and requirements to meet the project objective. Define scope. It is the process of developing a detailed description of the project and product. Create WBS, work breakdown structure. We subdivide the project deliverables and project work into smaller, more manageable components. Validate scope. This is the process of formalizing acceptance of the completed project deliverables. Control scope process. Monitoring the status of the project scope and managing changes to the scope baseline if required. Next topic is project scope versus product scope. Project scope management covers both project scope and product scope. Project scope refers to the work that needs to be accomplished to deliver a product, service, or result with the specified features and functions. It includes all the processes, tasks, resources, and time necessary to deliver the project's outputs. Whereas the product scope refers to the features, functions, and characteristics that describe the product, service, or result the project is meant to deliver. It defines what the final product will look like and what it will be able to do. Project scope is broader and focuses on the how, means how you will achieve the end goal. You need to follow few processes. You need to complete few tasks. Then only you will achieve your end goal. Whereas the product scope focuses on the what the end goal will look like, the features it will have, and the standards it must meet. Let's suppose we have one project launching a new e-commerce website. So in this case, the project scope will involve the tasks like doing the market research, setting the website's requirements, designing its layout, writing the code, setting up payment system, adding product listings, testing the site, promoting the launch, and making sure that it follows all the legality. So it will also include managing the team, schedules, budget, and communication with everyone involved in the project. So basically, these are the jobs, project activities which need to be done to launch a new e-commerce website. On the other hand, if we talk about the product scope, this could include features like easy navigation, secure payments, shopping carts, search options, mobile friendly design, customer accounts, and a built-in shipping calculator. So it will also cover the how the website looks, performance, and the extra features like the wish list or customer reviews. So by relating with this example, we can easily differentiate between project scope and product scope. Next topic is project scope management, predictive versus agile. In a predictive or waterfall approach, the project and product scope are defined early in the project and are typically fixed. Just imagine you are managing the construction of a bridge. So the project scope would be defined early, which will detail every aspect of the bridge like design, materials, and construction timeline. If let's say during construction, there is a request to change the design, so it must go through a formal change control process to assess the impact on cost, schedule, and quality. Whereas in an agile approach, the project scope is more flexible and evolves as the project progresses. It is a misconception that there is no need for project planning in agile projects. Agile projects do involve planning, but the approach to planning is different from waterfall or traditional. Agile planning is done iteratively and incrementally. This means that instead of planning the entire project upfront, planning is spread throughout the project in short cycles. We call them sprints. So each sprint begins with a planning session where the team decides what to work on next based on the current priorities. Just assume you are developing a new mobile app. So instead of defining every feature upfront, the team starts with a basic set of functionalities and add features in iterations. So the scope will evolve based on the user feedback, market trends, and stakeholder input. So if let's say the market demands a new feature, so it can be added to the backlog and prioritized in future sprints. Let's go through this table and see how these 6 processes of project scope management are carried out differently in predictive and agile projects. Trust me, this slide is going to be very informative and interesting too. So the very first process is plan scope management. In predictive project, the team will create a detailed plan for how the project scope will be defined, approved, and controlled. This plan is part of the overall project management plan and outlines how to handle changes and ensure the project meets its goals. Whereas in agile project, scope planning is more adaptable instead of a detailed plan. The product backlog is used. The team focuses on managing this backlog, allowing it to change as the project evolves and new information comes in. Second process is collect requirement. In predictive, requirements are gathered at the start of the project through various methods like interviews and surveys. These are documented in a matrix that tracks each requirement against the project's goal. In Agile, requirements are gathered and refined continuously throughout the project. The product owner and team maintain a prioritized list of requirements. We call it product backlog, which allow for the regular updates based on the stakeholder feedback. Third process is define scope. In predictive, the project scope is clearly defined at the beginning, so which will detail all the work required to deliver the project. This scope is fixed and guides the planning and execution of the project. Whereas in Agile, the scope is defined in short, repeatable cycles. We call them sprint. So at the start of each sprint, the team chooses items from the product backlog to work on. While each sprint's scope is very clear, the overall project scope still remains flexible and can change based on the feedback. Next process is create WBS, work breakdown structure. In predictive, the work breakdown structure is a detailed breakdown of all the work required for the project. It helps in planning, estimating, and managing the project tasks. In Agile, instead of a WBS, work breakdown structure, Agile teams use user stories or larger tasks. We call it epic to represent the work. So these are kept in the product backlog and are broken down into smaller tasks during the sprint planning. The focus is on completing work that adds value rather than managing a complex hierarchy of tasks. Next is validate scope. In predictive, the project deliverables are formally reviewed and approved by stakeholders at specific points during the project or at the end. So this ensures that the project meets the agreed upon scope. But in Agile, the scope validation happens continuously at the end of each sprint. The team shows completed work to the stakeholders who provide immediate feedback. So this allows for real-time adjustments to the scope. The last process is control scope. So in predictive, the project's scope is monitored to ensure it stays on track. Any changes to the scope are carefully reviewed and approved through a formal process. But in Agile, scope control is very flexible. The scope can be adjusted at the start of each sprint based on the feedback from client, from stakeholder. The product backlog is updated continuously, allowing changes without a formal approval process like predictive it has. This makes the Agile projects more adaptable to the change. Now we will discuss each process in detail with input, tools and techniques and output. We will take one project for the reference, installation and commissioning of 20 megawatt solar power plant, and we'll try to relate the processes in its context. So the plan scope management process is the first process in the project scope management. We create a scope management plan that documents how the project and product scope will be defined, validated, and controlled. The key benefits of this process is that it provides guidance and direction on how scope will be managed throughout the project. So to carry out this process, we need few inputs as project charter, project management plan, EEFs and OPAs. Project charter will serve as a foundational document for scope definition. For our solar power plant project, it will outline the key deliverables as installation of solar panels, inverters, electrical distribution system, and commissioning of whole plant to produce the 20 megawatt power. It will guide scope boundaries, means what is in scope or what is out of scope, like any kind of future expansion or plant operation will be out of scope. So charter will help understanding who the key stakeholders in this project. It will provide the initial timeline and budget, which influence how the scope will be managed, considering all the constraints like time limitations, budgetary boundaries. So that's the reason we need the project charter as an input. Next is project management plan. So how it helps in creating the scope management plan. The scope management plan must align with other components of the project management plan, like quality management plan, risk management plan, and overall project life cycle. Scope must define in a way that meets the quality standards required for the solar power plant. Risk management plan will influence how the scope will be managed in case there is any kind of delay in obtaining the permits from authorities, and what kind of adjustment needs to be done in scope. Come to the project life cycle. If project follows a predictive life cycle, the scope will likely be fully defined upfront. If some of its component follows the agile methodology, so then the scope will be planned iteratively. EEF is another input, so we can determine the factors which can impact our project. So for the solar power plant, this might include the environmental regulations, safety standards, and the government policies on renewable energy. Current market conditions is another factor, like the availability of solar panels and inverters, which will influence how the scope is planned, especially in the procurement and supply chain management. OPAs, if we talk how this will help, the history of similar solar project in past or lessons learned register help in identifying the potential challenges and best practices in defining and managing the scope. So organizational policies on scope management also can guide the creation of the scope management plan, which will ensure that it adheres to the company's standards and procedures. Come to the tools and techniques. So we need some tools and techniques to carry out this activity. So expert judgment is one of them. So professionals can be consulted who have experience in similar projects or specialized knowledge in solar energy system, project management, engineering, or regulatory compliance. So these experts can advise on the best practices for defining the scope, like number and type of solar panels needed for this project, installation methods, and the optimal layout for the maximizing energy production. Come to the data analysis. This is another powerful tool. So different data analysis techniques can be used, like alternative analysis. It's a technique used to evaluate different approaches, solutions, or options for achieving the project's objectives. The project team might use the alternative analysis to decide between different types of solar panels, like monocrystalline, polycrystalline, or thin film, based on the efficiency, cost, durability, and compatibility with the site's environmental conditions. Different installation methods can be analyzed, whether rooftop or ground mounted, which one would be the feasible for our project. So alternative analysis could also be applied to choose between different energy storage solutions. For example, we want to connect our solar system with battery storage system, or directly we want to connect it the power grid. So depending on the project need for energy reliability and cost effectiveness. Document analysis, it will involve the reviewing and analyzing the existing project documentation like business case, feasibility study, contract, and technical specification to gather more and more information that informs scope definition and management. Product analysis, it might involve the breaking down the solar power plant into its main component like solar panels, inverters, mounting systems, electrical connections, and monitoring systems. The project team might analyze the required features of the solar power plant, such as energy output, efficiency, durability, and environmental impact. Product analysis will ensure that the project scope includes all the essential features and functions of the solar power plant, leading to a clear and detailed scope definition that meets the project's objectives. Meetings. Meeting bring together the project team, stakeholders, and subject matter experts to discuss and agree on the approach to managing the project scope. Regular meetings ensure that all stakeholders are aligned on the project's scope, reducing the likelihood of misunderstanding or misaligned expectations. So finally, we will get the outputs. So what are the outputs? Scope management plan and requirement management plan. Scope management plan is a document that outlines how the scope will be defined, developed, monitored, controlled, and verified. So the plan would define how the scope of the solar power plant installation will be established, monitored, and controlled. Or if there any kind of changes in scope, like adding the additional solar panels or changing the layout of the installation. Requirement management plan. This is a plan that details how project and product requirements will be analyzed, documented, and managed. This plan would specify how the requirements for the solar plant like energy output, quality standards, and environmental compliance will be managed and tracked throughout the project life cycle. Second process is collect requirements. This process involves gathering and documenting the project's requirements from stakeholders. The main goal is to ensure that all stakeholder needs and expectations are captured to define the project scope accurately. If we see inputs here, so most of the inputs as project charter, project management plan, EEFs, OPAs are same as previous process we just spoke about. Project documents. So assumption log and stakeholder register, these are the project documents. Assumption log contains assumptions about project aspects like technology availability, resource allocation, and environmental conditions. So these assumptions provide a basis for identifying requirements and considering various scenarios. Stakeholder register, this document identifies all stakeholders, including their roles, interests, and influence on the project. So it helps ensure that all relevant parties are consulted during the requirements gathering process, ensuring a comprehensive understanding of needs. Business documents, business case, and benefit management plan. This justifies the project by outlining the benefits, cost, and risk. This provides context for the requirements by linking them to the strategic objectives of the organization, like cost savings, energy efficiency, and environmental impact. Agreements. If there are any pre-existing contract or agreement with vendors, suppliers, or other stakeholders. So these documents provide specific requirements that must be met. For example, an agreement with a supplier might specify the type and quality of solar panels to be used, so which will become a key requirement. Or a contract may require that the installation complies with local electrical codes and safety standards. So these become non-negotiable requirements for the project team. Come to the tools and techniques. So expert judgment, we spoke about it in last process. We can take leverage of knowledge and insights of individuals or groups with specialized expertise in solar power plant field. Data gathering. There are many methods to gather the data, like a brainstorming. So if a project team is trying to come up with new features for a product, so they might hold a brainstorming session, so where everyone suggests ideas. So no matter how unconventional, later the team can review the list, refine the ideas, and decide which one to pursue. Interviews. So it can be one-on-one or group discussions with stakeholders to gather their needs and expectations. Another one is focus group. Focus group bring together pre-qualified stakeholders and subject matter experts, SMEs, to learn about their expectations and attitudes about a proposed product, service, or result. A trained moderator guides the group through an interactive discussion designed to be more conversational than a one-on-one interview. Questionnaire and surveys. Questionnaire and surveys are written sets of questions designed to quickly accumulate information from a large number of respondents. Benchmarking. So benchmarking is another way to gather the information. So we need to compare the similar project or similar industry to get the requirement details. Data analysis. We spoke about this too in our previous process. There are variety of analysis method as alternative analysis, document analysis, product analysis, and root cause analysis. Decision making. Decision making technique is another powerful tool which is used to prioritize and finalize the project requirements. So there are many methods for the decision making, like voting. Voting is a simple way to make decisions as a group. When you have several options or ideas to choose from, so everyone involved gets a chance to vote on what they think is the best choice. So the option with the most votes usually wins. And this helps the group decide what to do the next. Another one is multi-criteria decision analysis. So this is a technique used to make decisions when you have several options and different factors to consider. So how we do this? Imagine you have to choose the best option from a list, but each option has its pros and cons. So to make a fair decision, so you create a decision matrix, a table where you list your options on one side and the important factors like cost, quality, time at other side. So next, you decide how important each factor is by giving it a weight. For example, if cost is very important, so you might give it a high weight like 10. If quality is less important, you might give it a weight of 5. So now for each option, you rate how well it performs on each factor. So then you multiply this rating by the weight of the factor. So after doing this for all the factors, you add up the scores for each option. So the option with the highest total score is considered the best choice. So these are the decision making techniques. Next is data representation. So affinity diagram. So how it helps? It helps in grouping the requirements into the categories to find their relationships. Mind mapping is another tool. So mind mapping is like creating a visual map of ideas to help organize and understand project requirements. Just imagine starting with a central idea like the project goal and then branching out with related ideas, details, and requirements. It's a bit like a drawing a tree where the main goal is the trunk and the branches represent different aspects or needs of the project. Interpersonal and team skills. This is the crucial tool in the requirement collection process as they facilitate effective communication, collaboration, and understanding among project stakeholders. Like active listening. So by carefully listening to what stakeholders say and what he don't say, the team can gather accurate and complete requirement, minimizing any kind of misunderstandings. Facilitation. So it helps guide discussions and workshop in a structured manner, ensuring that all stakeholders have a voice. Effective facilitation ensure that the requirement collection sessions are productive, stay on topic, and reach consensus on key points. Conflict resolution. So by addressing conflict early and diplomatically, the team can ensure that all stakeholder needs are considered and that conflicting requirements are reconciled. Team collaboration. Good collaboration ensures that the team works efficiently together, sharing insights and understanding the requirements from different perspectives. Context diagram. Context diagram is a high-level diagram that shows the system's boundaries, interactions with external entities, and major inputs and outputs. It helps in understanding the scope of the project and identifying the key requirements. For example, in our solar power plant project, a context diagram might depict the plant's interaction with the electrical grid, local infrastructure, and environmental systems, which helps to identify the necessary interfaces and data flows. Prototypes. Prototypes are preliminary versions of a product or system which are used to gather feedback and refine the requirements. Prototypes allow stakeholders to interact with a tangible representation of the project deliverables, which can help in identifying and refining the requirements. For example, in our solar power plant project, a prototype might include a small scale model of the solar panel or a simulation of the power generation system. So which will allow stakeholders to provide feedback on the design and functionality. So with these inputs and applying these tools and techniques, we are getting output here as a requirements documentation and requirements traceability matrix, RTM. Requirement documentation will contain the detailed description of all the project requirements. It will include the specific needs and expectation of the stakeholders, outlining what the project is supposed to deliver. Come to the requirement traceability matrix. It is a kind of tool which is used to track the requirements throughout the project lifecycle. So it ensures that all requirements are met by linking each requirement to its corresponding deliverables, design, test cases, and other project elements. So we are going to discuss it in detail in our next slide. Next topic is requirements traceability matrix, RTM. The RTM is a grid that connects each project requirement to the final product or outcome that fulfills it. By using an RTM, we can make sure that every requirement is meaningful and contributes to the project's goals and business objectives. It allows us to monitor each requirement throughout the project, ensuring that everything planned is completed by the end. Additionally, the RTM helps us manage any changes to the project's scope, making sure nothing is overlooked. So this is a simple example showing the metrics of installation and commissioning of 20 megawatt solar power plant. So the first column is ID. So this is the unique identifier like R001, R002, R003. It allows for easy tracking and reference throughout the project. Second column is requirement description. This column provides a clear and concise description of that requirement. Like here, the project requires the installation of 80,000 solar panels to meet the energy production goals. The third column is business needs, opportunities, goals, objectives. This describes how this requirement supports the broader business goals or opportunities. Like the installation of these solar panels is crucial for increasing energy production to satisfy the local energy demands. Next column is project objective. So this shows how this requirement aligns with the specific objectives of the project. So here, the installation of the 80,000 solar panels must be completed by the third quarter of the project timeline. Next is associate ID. So this ID links this requirement to the other related elements or requirements within the project. So like this one, A001, it may refer to a related requirements or activity such as the procurement of solar panels. WBS deliverables, next column. This connects the requirement to a specific deliverables within the work breakdown structure. Like here, WBS 1.1 represents the deliverable for installing the solar panels, which is a key component of the project's overall work structure. Next is product design. It indicates how the requirement is reflected or influences the product design. Like this code PD001, it may refer to the design specification that the 80,000 solar panels must adhere to. Product development, next column PDV001. It links the requirement to specific development activities that will ensure the requirement is met. For example, PDV001 could represent the phase in which the solar panels are procured and prepared for the installation. The last column shown here is test cases. It specifies the test cases that will verify the requirement has been fulfilled. So TC001 might involve testing the installation process to ensure that all 80,000 solar panels are correctly installed and operational. So that's how we mention all the requirements in this RTM grid, and it is continuously updated throughout the project lifecycle. Next process is define scope. Define scope is the process of developing a detailed description of the project and product. The key benefit of this process is that it describes the product, service, or result boundaries and acceptance criteria. If we see inputs here, the inputs like project charter, project management plan, EEFs, and OPAs are similar to those used in other processes, and we have already covered them in detail in the previous slides. Come to the project documents. There is the requirements documentation, which we obtained as an output from the collect requirement process, and it serves as an input here. Another important input is the risk register, which includes strategies to address risk that might influence the project scope, such as adjusting or reducing the project or product scope to avoid or minimize the risks. Come to the tools and techniques. The techniques such as expert judgment, data analysis, decision making, interpersonal and team skills, product analysis, these all are commonly used across various processes within scope management. These techniques help in effectively planning, analyzing, and managing the project's scope, ensuring that all aspects are thoroughly considered and aligned with project objectives. Come to the outputs. So we are getting two outputs from this process: project scope statement and project document updates. Project scope statement is a detailed description of what the project will deliver, including the major deliverables, assumptions, and constraints. It defines the entire scope of the project, covering both the project and product aspects, and the conditions that must be met before the project deliverables are accepted. This statement helps ensure that all stakeholders have a clear and common understanding of what the project will achieve. It also specifies what is included and what is excluded in the project, helping to manage expectations and prevent scope creep. If we recall the project charter, it gives a high-level overview of project scope. But this project scope statement goes into much more detail, and it is used throughout the project for planning, execution, and evaluating any kind of changes. Come to the project document updates. So project document like assumptions log, requirement documentation, and requirement traceability metrics are updated as a result of carrying out this define scope process. Like in assumption log, it is updated with additional assumptions or constraints that were identified during this process. Requirements documentation may be updated with additional or changed requirements. And RTM, the requirement traceability matrix, may be updated to reflect the updates in requirement documentation. Stakeholder register, where additional information on existing or any new stakeholders is gathered as a result of this process. So it is recorded in the stakeholder register. Next process is create WBS. Create WBS is the process of subdividing project deliverables and project work into smaller, more manageable components. The key benefit of this process is that it provides a framework of what has to be delivered. This process is performed once or at predefined points in the project. Come to the inputs, the project management plan. It means we are referring to scope management plan, which is the one of key component of project management plan. So project scope statement will define how the WBS will be created. Come to the project documents, like project scope statement. It is one of the project document. It describes the work that will be performed and the work that is excluded. Another project document is requirement documentation. So it describes how individual requirements meet the business need for the project. Come to the tools and techniques. So expert judgment means involving the experts to guide the creation of the WBS. For our example, solar power experts might provide inputs on the most logical way to break down the tasks which are involved in installation and commissioning of the plant. Next, tool and techniques decomposition. So decomposition is a technique used for dividing and subdividing the project scope and project deliverables into small, more manageable parts. The lowest level work is called as work package in WBS structure. for which the cost and duration can be estimated and managed. The level of detail for work package will vary with the size and complexity of the project. For example, the deliverable install solar panel can be broken down into tasks like civil work, install mounting structure, install panels, install inverters, install electrical components and cabling. In next slide, we will be discussing the WBS creation in detail. Come to the outputs. We are getting two outputs out of this process. One is scope baseline and second is project document updates. So scope baseline is the approved version of a scope statement, WBS, and its associated WBS dictionary, which can be changed only through formal change control procedures and is used as a basis for comparison. Component of scope baseline are project scope statement, WBS dictionary, and work package and planning package. Project document updates are assumption log, requirement documentation, so which may need to be updated as a result of carrying out this process. Next topic is work breakdown structure, WBS. It is a hierarchical decomposition of a project into smaller, more manageable components. It breaks down the total scope of work into individual tasks and deliverables, providing a clear and structured overview of what needs to be done to complete the project. To understand it better, we have one project here, installation and commissioning of 20 megawatt solar power plant. And this is the work breakdown structure for this project. The title of the project is the project scope statement, and the major task below as project initiation, designing and engineering, procurement, these are broken down into small manageable components. These components are called work packages, which are the last level deliverables and cannot break down further. If you notice, these work packages have special coding or unique identifier. These identifiers provide a structure for hierarchical summation of costs, schedule, and resource information and form a code of account. These are the unique identifier. So WBS has three layers. The lower layer is of work packages here all the way. And the top layer is a control account, this layer. Control account is a management control point where scope, budget, and schedule are integrated and compared to the earned value for performance measurement. Each work package is part of the control account. Middle layer is of planning package, which is optional and it is not shown here. A planning package is a work breakdown structure component below the control account and above the work package with known work content but without the detailed schedule activities. So let's suppose in this installation control account here, a planning package is added, which is installation, preparation, and coordination. So to cover the high level preparatory activities before the actual specific installation task like mounting structure and install solar panel, inverters and electrical components begin. So this planning package helps bridge the gap between the overarching installation control account and the specific work packages, ensuring that everything is organized and ready before the actual installation task begins. Next process is validate scope. Validate scope process is about officially confirming that the project's completed work meets the agreed upon requirements. Its main benefit is that it makes the acceptance process more objective and helps ensure that the final product, service, or result is accepted by validating each piece of work. This process is done periodically during the project as necessary. If we talk about inputs here, so project management plan. So three components of project management plan as scope management plan, requirement management plan, and scope baseline will provide foundational base for this process. Project documents. So project documents like lessons learned register. So lessons learned earlier in the project can be applied to the later phases in the project to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of validating deliverables. Quality reports. The information presented in the quality reports may include all quality assurance issues managed or escalated by the team, recommendations for improvement, and the summary of findings from the control quality process. So this information is reviewed prior to product acceptance. Requirements documentation. So requirements are compared to the actual results to determine if a change, corrective action, or preventive action is necessary. RTM. The RTM contains information about requirements, including how they will be validated. Verified deliverables. These are deliverables that have been inspected and confirmed to be free of defects by the quality control process. Work performance data. Information about the project's performance, such as which deliverables have been completed. Tools and techniques. Inspection involves activities like measuring, checking, and verifying to see if the work and deliverables meet the required standards and criteria for acceptance. Decision making. In this process, the stakeholders reviews the deliverables and decide whether to accept or reject them. So this often involves formal meetings and documented approvals. Come to the output. So here we are getting output as an accepted deliverables. So deliverables that meet the acceptance criteria and are formally signed off by the customer or sponsor. Work performance information. So it includes the information on which deliverables were accepted, which were not, and the reason for rejection. This information helps in tracking the project's progress. Change requests. If any deliverables are not accepted, a change request may be issued to correct the problem. This change request could lead to rework or adjustments to the project scope. Project document updates. So lessons learned register. So documenting any lessons learned during the scope validation process. Requirements documentation. So updates may be required if the scope changes or new requirements are identified. Requirement traceability metrics. So it will be updated to reflect the status of the validated and accepted requirements. Control scope. This is the last process of project scope management. It involves monitoring the status of the project and managing changes to the scope baseline. The goal is to ensure that the project remains on track with its defined scope and to address any changes effectively. Come to the inputs here. So project management plan. So its components as scope management plan, requirements management plan, change management plan, configuration management plan, scope baseline, performance measurement baselines. These all are the inputs for this process. Come to the project documents. So lessons learned register, requirements documentation, and requirement traceability matrix. These all are referred for this process. Work performance data. It is another crucial input for control scope process, which provides the information on project performance, including scope performance and any deviations from the planned scope. Tools and techniques. So data analysis is a tool and techniques here for this process. So we conduct the variance analysis. So which compares the baseline to the actual results and determine if the variance is within the threshold amount or if corrective or preventive actions taken are appropriate. Trend analysis. It examines the project performance over time to determine if performance is improving or deteriorating. So outputs we are getting out of this process is work performance information, which provides the detailed information on scope performance, including deviations and trends. For example, the report showing whether the installation of solar panels is ahead or behind schedule. Change requests, as we are comparing the performance. So the change request will be raised to the project scope, which could arise from performance issues or any kind of new requirements. Project management plan updates. Any change to the project management plan goes through the significant change control process via a change request. If there are approved changes or significant variances occur, so all the components of project management plan like scope baseline, scope management plan, schedule baseline, cost baseline, performance measurement baseline, all need to be updated. Project document updates, lessons learned register can be updated with techniques that are efficient and effective in controlling the scope, including causes of variances and corrective action chosen. Requirement documentation. So requirement documentation may be updated with additional or changed requirements. RTM. RTM may be updated to reflect updates in the requirement documentation. That wraps up our discussion on project scope management. We will dive deeper into each subsidiary plan in our upcoming episodes. So stay tuned. Before we part ways, I'd request you to please show your support by liking and subscribing to my channel. Your engagement means a lot to me. Namaste, goodbye, Sampai Jumpa.